It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. The Marc Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Marc is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Marc Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Marc Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. For prior podcasts of the show, to check out some of the columns that I write for Penn Live and the Harrisburg Patriot News, the American Interest and Western Journal, or to check out some of the great merchandise we have, you can check out the marcscaringishow.com website. You can also find us on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, and we're broadcasting live right now, and you can comment, and we'll read your comments on the air. And welcome to my listeners on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. Well, let's get down to business. Former Vice President Joe Biden is in. He has thrown his proverbial hat into the ring, and he has announced his intention to seek the Democratic nomination for president in 2020. Biden announced the initiation of his presidential campaign with a video about the incident in Charlottesville, Virginia, back in 2017 at the Unite the Right rally. Now, you may remember this rally was organized by a couple of leaders of the alt-right movement to protest the removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee, the former commander, one of the top generals, the top general in the Confederate States of America during the Civil War. Robert E. Lee has a statue in his honor in the name of a park for him in Charlottesville, Virginia. And that's been there for quite some time. He was a native Virginian and famously was someone who opposed slavery and opposed the Civil War until President Lincoln and the Union Army revealed their intention of invading Virginia. And when Virginia seceded from the Union, Robert E. Lee got involved as an officer in the Confederate Army. Nevertheless, that's a little historical lesson. But in 2017, there was a rally that was organized to protest efforts to remove the statue of Robert E. Lee and rename the park, remove his name from the park. And this resulted from the larger movement across the country, primarily in the southern states, to eradicate public expressions, public memorials that were laudatory of Confederate generals and Confederate politicians that stemmed in part from the horrible shooting that occurred from an individual a white male, who declared himself his affiliation with or his support for white supremacy and racism toward blacks that occurred at a predominantly black church. And so this kind of led to a movement to remove Confederate statues, the Confederate battle flag, and others. And it created the situation that occurred down in Charlottesville a couple of years ago, and that rally attracted all kinds of people from all kinds of organizations and groups, including neo-Nazis and members of the Ku Klux Klan and some other racial or racist groups in America that unfortunately exist today. And it also attracted members of the extreme left-wing terrorist group, Antifa. So the situation was ripe for a serious political discord and ripe for violence. And wherever Antifa has engaged itself violence has erupted. And so push came to shove down in Charlottesville. The rally was canceled by the police, and then it quickly devolved into a street fight that ended up in the horrific and tragic death of that young lady, Heather Heyer. In any event, former Vice President Joe Biden decided to launch his presidential campaign on Thursday using a video in which he decried the President Trump's response to Charlottesville. Now, as an interesting aside, the Biden launch video was likely done by Cristobal Alex. The Biden presidential team hired Cristobal Alex. He was the creator of that controversial 2017 Latino Victory Fund ad, which depicted white Donald Trump supporters attempting to run down minority children. And that ad featured footage from the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. And the ad was roundly condemned, and the Latino group, the Latino Victory Fund, ultimately had to pull the ad, of course, without any apology. But that's a little bit of the backstory on who probably was behind the Joe Biden presidential launch video that went out on Thursday. And anyway, so Vice President Joe Biden has put the statements made by President Trump in response to Charlottesville directly in his crosshairs. And Biden is essentially saying that white Trump is a proponent or an advocate or a leader, if you will, of a white supremacist or white nationalist movement in our country. And Joe Biden is going to be the one who will take down Trump and eliminate white supremacy, white nationalism, and white racism in America. That's what we gather from the Joe Biden presidential campaign launch video. Now, recall that President Trump made comments about Charlottesville that offended many in the liberal media and many Democratic politicians. And the media and the Democrats, and now Joe Biden in his campaign launch video, they are repeatedly lying about Trump's comments. They claim that President Trump said the neo-Nazis and white supremacists are fine people, when the president said there were fine people on both sides. Now, of course, the president was talking about people on both sides of the debate about whether we should take down statues of former slave owners like Thomas Jefferson, and whether we should take down statues of former Confederate generals such as Robert. The president was saying there are fine people who oppose taking down statues of Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and other founding fathers of this country, great Americans, all who owned slaves. That's the dispute that President Trump was commenting about. But of course, the media and Democrats misconstrued the president's remarks to have him saying that he thought the neo-Nazis, the white nationalists, the Klan members were fine people. That is, of course, a patent lie. The president specifically and expressly excluded those people from his fine people comment. And we'll talk more about the president's comments in Charlottesville, and former Vice President Joe Biden's launching of his presidential campaign for 2020. When we return from this brief commercial break, you're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Marc Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to The Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Thanks for tuning in on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. And you can check us out live on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, and you can send in your comments, and we'll read them on the air, and we'll engage in this political debate about the launching of former Vice President Joe Biden's campaign for the Democratic nomination for president in 2020. The former vice president launched his campaign video on Thursday, in which he clearly has kind of thrown down the gauntlet, so to speak, on the issue of Charlottesville and the larger issue of racism in America. Biden's going to make racism in America the focal point of his presidential campaign. He is, of course, accusing President Trump of being a racist and a supporter and advocate of white nationalism and white supremacy. And Joe Biden is going to remove Donald Trump from the Oval Office and restore racial healing and unity in America. That's the Biden campaign. He's focusing on Charlottesville, but his portrayal and characterization of President Trump's remarks in response to Charlottesville are, of course, a patent and provable lie. The President of the United States did not say that white nationalists and white supremacists and the Klan and neo-Nazis are fine people. The media and Democrats who claim that the president did make those statements are simply lying to the American people. Here is a transcript of the president's press conference back in 2017. President Trump said you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. So you know what? It's fine. You are changing history. You are changing culture. And you had people. And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the president has treated them absolutely unfairly. And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group, also you had some fine people, but you also had some troublemakers. You see them come down with the black outfits and the helmets and the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group. Now he's talking about Antifa, the other group of people there. Now, so tell your friends and your neighbors who condemn Trump as a white nationalist and racist for saying there are fine people in the neo-Nazi and KKK groups that he did not say that. Remember, quote the president as saying, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. So the president of the United States has condemned totally. That's a pretty strong condemnation. It's not partial. It's not piecemeal. It's a total condemnation. Neo-Nazis, white nationalists, totally condemned by President Donald J. Trump in that press conference in which the media and liberals say the president believes and said that those white nationalists and neo-Nazis are fine people. That's, in fact, not what the president said. Nevertheless, that is now the focal point of former Vice President Joe Biden's campaign for the presidency of the United States. Now, the media, Democrats, and Joe Biden refuse to state Trump's actual quote, the full quote, because, of course, they will do anything to portray Trump as a racist. That fits within their narrative. Most Republicans are very much used to being called or considered racist. That is just par for the course in being a Republican in America today. Even though our Republican Party was founded upon the abolition of slavery, which was opposed by Democrats who were the party of slavery, and our Republican Party fought to end the Democrat Party's Jim Crow laws, their segregation laws. Our party fought for all of the civil rights amendments to the United States Constitution, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, and various civil rights statutes over the objection of the pro-slavery, pro-Jim Crow, anti-integration, and anti-civil rights Democratic Party. But of course, the media and Democrats portray us as the racists. We get it. We've always been portrayed as racist. But in Charlottesville, the media and Democrats, they were expanding their traditional claim that all Republicans are racist to include all Americans who oppose the dismantling of our statues and memorials to our founding fathers, including one of our greatest, Thomas Jefferson. Now, Joe Biden, Democrats, and the media believe that all of those Americans are racist too. So it's not just Republicans who are racist, according to our friends in the media and the Democratic Party and Joe Biden, but any American who says, now, wait a second, I don't think we should remove a statue of Thomas Jefferson, or I don't think we should tear down the Washington Monument, or I don't think we should tear apart Mount Vernon or Monticello. The media and the Democrats and Biden are saying those Americans are racist as well. But that's just simply not true. Not every American who opposes the taking down of a Thomas Jefferson statue is a racist. Biden declared the radical left-wing terrorist group Antifa. He referred to them as a courageous group of Americans. Now, Antifa, this is the group that will go to various Trump rallies, as they did during the 2016 presidential election, with clubs and baseball bats and mace, and they will engage in physical assaults and physical violence. Remember when Trump was going to speak in Chicago, and they started fires in Berkeley. They started fires on campus. It was mayhem. This is Antifa. And these are the people that former Vice President Joe Biden, he's taking the side of Antifa. He calls them a courageous group of Americans. So according to former Vice President Joe Biden, if you oppose the dismantling of a statue of Thomas Jefferson, you are an evil, racist member of the Nazi Party or the KKK. But if you use clubs, urine bags, mace, knives, and other weapons to physically assault those attempting to engage in free speech and free assembly, you are a courageous group of Americans. That's how twisted Joe Biden and our friends in the media and the Democratic Party have reality in America today. Now, in my view, it's disgusting that Joe Biden would throw himself in with this massive defamation of the American people, but that's where we are in America. And Joe Biden is not trying to conduct or engage in the healing of racial division in America. He's throwing oil onto a fire that has been either smoldering or raging since the first settlers and colonists stepped foot onto the North American continent. Joe Biden, he does this to score political points, because he needs to score political points with the left that dominates the Democratic Party primaries. So he's been doing this for most of his career. Remember when Vice President Biden was speaking in Danville, Virginia, to a group of largely black Americans, and he was talking about Republicans, the Republicans of Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan in the 2012 presidential election. And Joe Biden said of Republicans, he said this to a group of predominantly black Americans, he said, Republicans, they're going to put you all back in chains. Remember that statement from the then Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden. Now watch the video of Biden saying this, by the way. He uses a fake Southern accent, the way Hillary Clinton uses a fake Southern accent. It kind of poses the question. Joe Biden is not from the South. He does not have a Southern accent, but yet he'll use it when he's trying to stoke racism and racial division in America by telling a group of largely black Americans that Republicans are going to put them all back in chains. Now, remember that it was the Republican Party that was founded to abolish the chains of slavery, and it was the Democratic Party that defended slavery and its chains. And so, I wonder, do extremely white and rich lifelong U.S. senators and politicians from Delaware, do they say y'all? You got to watch the video because he says they're going to throw y'all back in chains. So there's Joe Biden being fake and trying to stoke racial division in America. But remember back in the 1980s, and there's a video of this that's recently surfaced as Biden has been ruminating, as he has been for about 50 years, about running for president. And there's a video of Joe Biden opposing busing of black students into predominantly white school districts in Delaware. And so that poses the question, was Joe Biden a white supremacist for opposing desegregation in Delaware? Of course, none in the media will ask that question, but that was, not a politically correct position to take back in the late 70s and early 80s, even for a United States senator from Delaware. Well, Biden has been playing the race card one way or another his entire political career. His campaign launch video is really just the latest example of that. Biden declared that in his video and also an op-ed that he wrote in light of Charlottesville, he declared that as a result of Charlottesville and the Trump presidency, that we are in the battle for the soul of this nation. And I'll say it's unfortunate that Biden would use military terms to define a political campaign, particularly in today's climate in which the country is so divided between left and right. But Biden wants to do battle against those of us who wish to defend the founding fathers and the memorials dedicated to them for this great nation. And as President Trump stated during the press conference that he has been so roundly condemned as a racist for saying, what are we going to do next? Are we going to take down statues of George Washington because he was a slave owner too? And I would propose that if we take down the statue of the founding father of the United States of America, George Washington, the first man of our country, the first president of the United States, the man who did more to create the United States than any other person in the history of our country. If we take down statues to George Washington, then it seems to me, since Joe Biden says America is an idea, that if we take down George Washington's statue and the idea that it represents, then we are no longer the United States of America. And that is a line that we must not cross. So we must not, through white guilt, fake white guilt, refuse to stand up and defend the statues and memorials of the founding fathers of our country, even if they owned slaves. We'll talk more about this when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Marc Scaringi Show.
Let's get back to The Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to The Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we put America first. Is former Vice President Joe Biden, is he putting America first in the launch of his presidential campaign through a video in which he focuses in on the riots, essentially the street fighting and battles that occurred in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017. Joe Biden taking the position that President Trump has advocated and promoted white nationalism and racism in America, that Trump is a defender of the KKK, neo-Nazis, etc., by referring to them as fine people. Of course, we are revealing and disclosing how that is an absolute lie, that Trump condemned white nationalists and the KKK totally, a total condemnation, the president said during that same press conference. But nevertheless, let's open up the phone banks and pose the question to our listeners. Is Joe Biden healing or stoking racial division in America? Call in 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. We have Ellen from Hanover. You're on The Marc Scaringi Show.
Oh, hi, Mark. Yeah, to answer your question, I think Joe Biden is way out of line, being divisive. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the issue of racism and why it's so hard for blacks to let go of this, and also what I think will bring about eventually the end of it. I'm a distant relative of Robert E. Lee. My mother even had a physical resemblance to him. There was a PBS program on a couple of weeks ago that was really quite objective, I think, about the racism problem, and indicated that it pointed out that the whole problem continued well into the 20th century with the voting rights denial and the KKK and the sharecroppers and all of that. And it was quite candidly said that the Republican Party fought against racism, where the Democrats were really the party that opposed voting rights and this sort of thing. When I moved to Hanover, I was sued because I believe it was because I had a biracial son, and other people with the so-called violation were not sued, so I'm convinced that was part of it. But Hanover had a reputation for racism, but they've changed a lot in 25 years. But racism can be difficult to identify because, for example, if a black person goes to apply for a job and he does not get the job, he's not sure if that's racism or just another reason. So it creates a bit of a paranoia in people.
Well, let me ask you this, Ellen from Hanover. Do you think Joe Biden mischaracterizing Donald Trump's statements and putting the false statements in the president's mouth that the president lauded and called neo-Nazis and KKK fine people. Do you think that helps racial reconciliation in America?
No, it doesn't. I think racism is always going to be present because, frankly, there are some people who need somebody else to look down on, and it gives them a boost, an ego boost. But it's just it gives people who want to foment a division a handle to grasp. I know a young woman, for example, who was employed by a fast food restaurant, and she had to quit because of the racism there. She is biracial, but I think the good news is that just racism is just plain becoming disreputable. I mean, and eventually this will leak down to the people who get an ego boost from it. Because, for example, somebody might make a racist comment and they don't get opposed, but there just isn't any response. So it's just becoming disreputable, and eventually it will ebb away. But these people who are fomenting division, they're just doing it for their own ends.
For their own political purposes, you think?
Oh, yes.
Well, Ellen from Hanover, thank you so much for that deep, comprehensive analysis of racism in America. We appreciate that, Ellen from Hanover. Thanks for calling. John from Colonial Park, you're on the Marc Scaringi Show. Do you think Joe Biden's campaign video, in which he mischaracterized President Trump's comments as Trump being in support of neo-Nazis and the KKK, do you think that helps or hurts racial reconciliation in America?
I don't think it does either one.
Okay.
Because people are going to think what they're going to think.
Okay.
But the reason I called you.
Yes.
Donald Trump's been president for almost 3 years now. And he's a Republican and conservative. And he said, we're going to lower taxes. But I live in Lower Paxton Township.
Right.
And he's against all these DPA and everything. Why are they raising our taxes $32 a quarter?
In Lower Paxton Township?
Yes, they are, but not the businesses.
Oh, okay.
It's already been settled that the residents, each house is going to pay $32 a quarter. But they haven't made a decision on the businesses. And the businesses are the one that's contributing to the groundwater.
Well, Donald Trump's tax cuts have not trickled down to the state and local municipal level. But
now, we're not talking Ronald Reagan. We're talking Donald Trump said that he's against, he said it when he was running for president. He's against all these environmental things because it doesn't make sense. Correct?
That's right, yes.
Yes. So then why are our local conservative, so-called conservatives, raising the local individual tax owners all this money, but they're not doing nothing to the businesses?
Well, John, I'm going to have to look into that and get back to you on that, but I thank you for calling. John from Colonial Park, appreciate the call. Philip from Wiccanisco, Joe Biden has launched his presidential campaign. He's focused squarely on the Charlottesville, Virginia issue. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are very simple. Joe Biden doesn't have anything to run on. So all he wants to do is divide and conquer. It's an old strategy. The Democrats have been using this for years. The only person who didn't use that strategy was John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and look what it cost him. It cost him his life. His own party killed him, for God's sake.
Yeah, if you look at former Vice President Joe Biden's campaign launch and his initial appearance on The View, he really discusses no policy initiatives.
Correct.
There's nothing concrete about why he's running for president. It's all these kind of vague thoughts that Trump is a horrible, evil racist and Joe Biden is going to heal America.
And it's all this music in the background to do a little bit of psychological ploy to make you think, we're going to make you greater. How? We're going to make the country better. How? The only thing I can say is every time he says it is how. What are you going to do? And no policies, nothing at all. No. Just divide, insult your opponent, and continue down the road. You know, and we Republicans, I'm not a Republican exactly. I'm a realist. But with somebody like Trump gives you basic facts and information. If only the Democrats would learn, how to run a campaign.
Well,
we ran a lousy campaign in Pennsylvania. That's why we lost.
Well, you're right about Trump. When he had announced his run for the presidency, and his entire campaign was the most issue-based and issue-focused presidential campaign I've ever experienced.
Right, and he told them what he was going to do. Not only that, but he's always smart enough that when they say, you want these people to come across the border, fine, we'll send them to your sanctuary cities. We're giving you what you want. And then they blew up. That was the most funny thing I ever heard.
That was great, yes.
He played him right. He played him like a violin. And yet, what do we do when we have our people? This last one over here, this guy that was running for governor over here, the biggest ploy in the world was used by Governor Wolf. Wolf used the old-fashioned old lady ploy. It was a voiceover. It was very simple. Hi, I'm little old lady who, and I've got 70,000 cats. And Governor, if the other man gets in, I'm going to lose all my kitty cats because they're going to tax my, they're going to tax my Social Security. A total ball-faced lie. But the man who was running on the other ticket, the Republican ticket, didn't do anything to counter it. He could have used a veteran with a veteran ID card, saying some things, showing a newspaper article where Governor Wolf had said, and I couldn't find this newspaper article, where Governor Wolf had said that he was going to tax people, and if some of them lose their home, oh, so what? But I couldn't find the newspaper article, and nobody helped me.
Philip,
see, we got to learn how to run campaigns,
I agree. I'm with you. We got to follow Donald Trump's lead. I got to go. I got to take a commercial break. Philip from Wiconisco, thanks for calling. You're listening to the Marc Scaringi Show. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Now back to the Marc Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Marc Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism here on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. And we're also live on Harrisburg 100 Live, and we've gotten some comments from our friends on Harrisburg 100 referencing Joe Biden having some skeletons in his closet of his own controversial racial remarks, and we discussed at least one of those in which Joe Biden many years ago, as a United States Senator, opposed busing in Delaware to attempt to desegregate public schools in Delaware. So Joe Biden, we'll see if any in the media ask Biden about his position back then, which the media will portray as a racist position had it been taken by a Republican. But because the position was taken by a Democrat, United States Senator Joe Biden, there will be some sort of alternative, factual and alternative explanation for Biden's decision. And some other comments on Harrisburg 100 from ARMX that how about Biden's son, $1 billion deal in Ukraine, and we'll talk more about that probably in some upcoming shows. Middle Class Joe, as he likes to be referred to, has succeeded in getting his son and his family incredibly rich through the vice president's public service. His son has gotten some extremely lucrative deals from oligarchs in Ukraine and in China as a direct result of his father's intervention. And Peter Schweitzer has a story and a pretty comprehensive account on the corruption of Joe Biden and how he is enriching himself and his family, similar to the way that the Clintons became extremely wealthy through their good old-fashioned honest public service. But today we're talking about the fact that Joe Biden has decided to focus his campaign for the presidency on racism in America and how he is going to somehow reconcile the racial divide by just being middle-class Joe and being a man of integrity, he says, when he's asked by the ladies on The View, who, of course, were fawning in adulation of Joe Biden, how, what makes him different. He just kind of talks about integrity and other vapid, empty words But Joe Biden has focused on Charlottesville, and he is portraying Donald Trump and thus Donald Trump supporters as racists. And my thought is that is just stoking racial division in America. It's doing nothing to heal it. Let's hear from our listeners to the Marc Scaringi Show. You're welcome to call in 717-540-0580. We have John from York. You're on the Marc Scaringi Show. Is Joe Biden, is he healing or is he helping or hurting racial strife in America?
Well, I'll tell you, I want to say it's good to talk to you again.
Well, glad to have you, John.
Sure, thank you. You know, the philosophy of the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis and all white supremacists is so terribly evil and so terribly non-biblical, if that's a word, non-Christian, and so terribly un-American, that I think you ought to have proof before you call somebody a racist. Racism is such a terrible thing that we should all be working against. We should all be trying to bring more unity and love and peace and goodwill.
Well, John, let me ask you this. When President Trump stated neo-Nazis and white nationalists should be condemned totally, what do you think about that statement?
Well, I agree with him. And I wasn't aware that he had said that. I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to say that I think he should emphasize that more and more, and he should have emphasized it more then. But you say he did.
Well, it's right from the transcript from his press conference. The President Trump stated, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists because they should be condemned totally.
Well, he's right if he said that, and I believe you. I mean, I guess the news media didn't bring that out like they should have.
Of course not, because it doesn't fit their narrative that President Trump is a racist. And so when Joe Biden, when he perpetuates that the fake news that Donald Trump said neo-Nazis and white nationalists are fine people, that stokes racial division in America.
Well, yeah,
Joe Biden is doing exactly what he accuses Trump of doing, which Trump didn't do. Joe Biden is he projecting his own racism onto Donald Trump? I don't know. I'm not a psychologist.
I hope not. We don't need a racist in there. Why? No, I think we should all, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, everybody, all of us, myself, at the top of the list. We should all be working for equal opportunity, more so for our Black American brothers and sisters and Hispanics and all people. We should be all doing a lot more to bring a lot to love and unity and Christian love between all of us.
Well, I think that's beautifully said, very well said, and President Trump has done has some tremendous things for the Black community, Hispanic community. Unemployment rates for Blacks and Hispanics are at an all-time historical low. So the man has done some good for Black and Hispanic Americans.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about the Black and Hispanic unemployment rates being so much lower. That is very good. That is very good. Well, so I don't want to call anybody a racist. If that's what Biden was doing, no, that's not the way to start a presidential campaign. No.
I agree. John from York, thanks for calling out. I've got to get some other callers. Appreciate having the benefit of your views as always. Joe from Pembroke, you're on the Marc Scaringi Show. Did Joe Biden, in his campaign launch, did he help or hurt racial division in America?
I think he hurt racial division. That's just too much shade. I mean, the left right now, if anybody can't see what the left is doing right now, then they'll never see it. Interesting concepts, and I really enjoy your program very much, but from the heart, I think it's an abomination that they took any of those statues down south. There were some great statues down there, and it's history. And you cannot, Santayana, once again, real simple stuff. If you can't, whatever it was, if you can't remember history, you will relive it. But a pleasure, sir. Have a great day.
Well, Joe, thanks for calling. Joe from Pembroke, appreciate having the benefit of your views. As always, Joe's a frequent caller, and we appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit more about the Joe Biden presidential campaign launch. I thought what was interesting is that the President Trump's nickname for Joe Biden appears to be Sleepy Joe. And the question is, will that stick? Will it work? Is that an effective nickname for former Vice President Joe Biden? I'm not so sure. I think Trump has done better in the past with nicknames. I think his nickname for Jeb Bush, Low Energy Jeb, was absolutely fantastic. It just crystallized one of the failings or the faults of Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush looked like he was kind of dragged into that presidential race. He was perhaps doing it because that's what Bushes do. They run for office. Jeb Bush really had no vision for what he would do as president. He had no drive. He had no drive for it. And President or then candidate Donald Trump saw that immediately and gave Jeb Bush that name, and that was the end of Jeb Bush. I think President Trump hit Ted Cruz pretty hard with the Lion Ted. That was a pretty good nickname. How about the nickname for Hillary Clinton? Crooked Hillary. That kind of crystallized all of the problems that Hillary Clinton was having during her presidential run with the email server scandal, Benghazi, and the fact that the Clintons had enriched themselves so much through their years of public service. They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars because they sacrificed for the good of the public, and they've made my life so much better, and I'm sure Hillary and Bill Clinton have made all of your lives so much better and healthier and safer and wealthier. So we thank them for their public service, right? Not so much. I'm being a little bit ironic here. But how about former President Barack Obama not endorsing Joe Biden for president? Now, Joe Biden declared on The View, which is a real hard-hitting news show, by the way, where he walks out there and the ladies of The View, they just kind of bow down and genuflect to him, and Meghan McCain was almost in tears that she loves Joe Biden, she said, and basically worshiping Joe Biden. Of course, the McCains and the Bidens are very close, intimate friends for many, many decades, and that's just an example that we have a ruling class in America, not really Republicans or Democrats. They're not really antagonists on political issues. They're all pretty much the same. They are just supporting and defending their own entrenched power, which is why Meghan McCain, who's purportedly a Republican, is gushing over Joe Biden. But I thought it was interesting that Barack Obama has not endorsed Joe Biden. But how about Joe Biden saying that he went to Obama first and asked the former president not to endorse him? Now, who in my listening audience believes that? Who in my listening audience believes that Joe Biden did not, and does not want the endorsement of Barack Obama for president? I think that is probably a lie, a white lie, perhaps, uttered from the lips of the man of integrity himself, former Vice President Joe Biden. I'll bet Joe Biden would give anything for Barack Obama's endorsement. It would mean a tremendous amount of political capital and campaign cash would immediately flood into the Biden campaign if Barack Obama endorsed him and got behind him. So I think our friend Sleepy Joe is giving us a little bit of a fib there as he announces his campaign for the presidency. That's all the time we have today for the Marc Scaringi Show. Thanks for listening. Tune in next week, same time, same place.